Boy, have I got a crazy story for you. Listen up, folks. Welcome to the show. Tired of the hype about living the dream? It's time for truth. This is the place for tools, power, and real talk so you can create the life you dream and deserve. Your ultimate life. Subscribe, share, create. You have infinite power. Welcome to Your Ultimate Life, the podcast we've been doing for 6+ years. We're in year 7 now. I'm so excited to be with you today. I want to talk more about story. I know I've been talking about story. So let's talk about some stories, okay? There's the creation story, the story of the beginning of the earth and the first people. And it doesn't matter what you believe in the context of science and religion. I'm sure that there is a perfect harmony of all this that we don't understand yet, so we're just arguing about nothing. But what I want to talk about is this most powerful force, the oldest force on the earth, and that is story. And I'm not counting the divine who has powers we don't understand. But you know what? When you think about Jesus, who's one, the Son of God as far as I'm concerned, but many religious leaders, they communicate through story. So I want to explore today why story is the most powerful force in the world, what we use it for. And this plays into, last episode we talked about what your story means, why people don't use it, and all the kind of things, and what your story actually is and what it isn't. And if you missed that one, boy, that's really important. So go back one episode and listen to that. But today, what I want to focus on is why we are on the air. Yeah. In the Your Ultimate Life podcast. Okay. I want to talk about why story is such a critical thing and why it's not optional. It is critical that you master this if and only if you want to have real power. If and only if you want to make a big difference in the world. I talk to so many people who say, I want to help people. I want to raise the consciousness on the planet. I want to change how we do this and that and list, healthcare and mental health and money and food and all kinds of things. And we want to change all that. Do you really? Because if you want to do that, you need to master story. You need to master storytelling. If you do, you'll make more money. You'll have more influence. You'll be more influential. You'll get to know more powerful people. You will be invited to places that you're not invited to today. So, do you want to have more influence? Do you want to get invited to speak? Do you want to get into places where you can make the real difference that's weighing on your heart you want to make? You must master storytelling. Now, this episode is not a class in storytelling. I do teach classes in storytelling, but that's not what this is. Today, we're going to talk about why it works and how it's been used for the entire history of mankind and what makes a good story. If you want to learn about how you can become a good storyteller, yourultimatelifepodcast.com, there's a contact form. Now, this is just a URL for the show. It's on all the platforms, you know that, but it's the URL for the show. But if you want to learn about the class, about how to be a good storyteller and how to get to the places I just talked about, use the contact form here and then story. Make the headline email story or storytelling. And then I'll know and I'll let you know how you can get into the class to learn how to tell powerful stories. Okay, story is not a marketing hack. In the internet marketing world, story has been turned into the Holy Grail. Well, it is, but it's not a hack. It's not a marketing tactic. It is the truth of our existence. And what I mean by that is, story is how we function. It's how we human beings belong to each other. It's how we relate to each other. It's how we learn. It's how we transmit truth. It's how we create courage and imagine possibility. And I started saying a minute ago that Jesus told everything through story parables. Some of them intentionally a bit opaque, and some of them were accompanied with explanation that were given to the group of people that he thought were prepared to understand. But story is the core. Our myths, our stories, our legends, our traditions, all are how we communicate what it means to be human. Well, then it's no wonder that it works in marketing, because when we connect with people who are watching or listening to our shows or videos or marketing, when we connect with the truth of what it's like to be human, guess what? They listen. We listen. That's why movies get popular. That's why the Star Wars nineology, trilogy, 3 trilogies, nineology plus all the spin-offs. The story element that we all recognize from our own yearning, if not from our own lives. So let's talk about humans. We do not live by information alone. And this is so evident in the era of AI and the smartphones. Smartphones have made people able to access more information and even each other more and better and faster. And people are more lonely, more isolated, and more separated. You know that. That is not the absence of proximity. You've seen 2 friends standing next to each other texting, maybe each other. Connection is not formed in that way. Meaning is not formed in that way. Story is the key. If you do not learn to tell story, you will fail at marketing. You will fail in leadership. You will fail in raising kids. You will fail. Fail may be a strong word, okay? You'll certainly do nowhere near as good as you could. Let's just put it that way. And I want for your success more than anything, so I use the word fail. You'll do way better in business, in parenting, in marketing, in loving yourself and loving others, in getting rich, in getting happy, in making an impact on the world if you learn to tell story, okay? Human beings don't live by information. We live by meaning. The meaning of things is what moves us, motivates us, pushes us away, or draws us in. Meaning travels through story. Now, that's not news. You know that. Information. Let's talk about the difference here. Information tells you what happened. It might tell you what to do. It might tell you what numbers matter, or it might tell you which step comes next, all that kind of stuff. But story, story tells you who you are. It tells you what matters and why. It lets you see what's possible. It lets you experience, not just hear, what courage looks like. It puts you in touch with the price that might be required. It lets you feel to the core of your soul what kind of life is worth building. Information enters the mind. Story enters the heart and the whole being. Story is how truth grows legs. Information explains, story awakens. And you know the difference between understanding and being motivated to move. A fact is going to inform you, but a story might just change everything. So, stories are how humans have always carried truth. Really. Okay, before there were slides and spreadsheets and funnels and books and universities and algorithms and whatever else, there were stories. Now, the stories carried tradition. They carried survival lessons. They carried in moral codes and tribal or group memory, spiritual truth and meaning, warning, belonging, identity, courage, purpose, all of those essential elements to our humanness were transmitted through stories, right? One of the ones I love about the internal conflict. I'm a coach, and so clients often are talking about, I want to do this, but I do this instead. I should do this, but then this happens. And we call it good and bad and temptation. We call it all kinds of things. But there's a story, the story about the 2 wolves, the white wolf and the black wolf inside. And this is a Native American Indian legend, I think. I'm not going to claim the tribe because somebody will tell me I'm wrong, and I probably will be. But the story is about the conflict. Two wolves, a white wolf and a bad wolf, always fighting for supremacy. And after Grandpa tells the little Indian kid that, the kid asks Grandpa, well, which one wins? And, the Grandpa says, well, the one you feed. And so that little story, and I'm sure I've got some details wrong. And some people, it's so funny. I got to tell a story here. So funny. Joy and I worked at the Heard Museum in Phoenix, and that's the largest museum for Southwest Native Americans, Indians. And we were docents, so we had a year-long training program, and we had to learn the language and the exhibits and all this stuff, and it was fun. We were docents for a couple of years after our training, so it was cool. And, of course, it was Native, and there were different tribes, the Navajo and the Hopi and the Apache and just, all the tribes that had to do with Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, that whole Southwest area, and northern Mexico, too. And we would call them Indians. And we would get corrected all the time. You shouldn't call them, First Peoples, First Nations, Natives, or whatever. And we would laugh because the Heard Museum had on its board of directors members from many of the 22, I think, different tribes that were represented in that Southwest geography. And they told us they were Indians. Call us Indians. And the reason for that was kind of funny, because all of the treaties that had been made between the different tribes in the U.S. called them Indians. That's how they were referred to. So they didn't want to lose that standing in the context of those contracts. So they embraced it and said, we are Indians. And so we had to explain that over and over. And of course, after we did, okay. And sort of the ethics and the appropriate language, all that stuff, out the window. And that's a story. I just told you a story about why I use the word Indian, because they asked us to, told us to, in referring to them. So anyway, just a funny story about a particular thing. Every story, or every tradition, whether it's a tribe or an ethnicity or a religion or any kind of group, has stories. Some of them are sacred, right? Sacred tradition, supernatural things, divine things. Some of them have to do with families, right? There's stories that families. There are hero stories in different traditions. There are origin stories. And this is where, marketing tries to use this as a hack. You got to use your origin story. And the reason you got to use your origin story is you got to create rapport with your potential customer and your marketing group. And so that's all true. Okay. But it misses the fundamental stuff, which is what is your origin story? And we talked about that last episode, like what parts of the million things that happen to you matter. What is your origin story? And if you just tell the origin story so you can create rapport, so they can like you, and you can get know, like, and trust, so they can buy your crap, you're a shallow marketer, and you're missing the real truth. Connective tissue in story is how we create relationship. If the only rapport that we are trying to create is just enough so you'll buy my stuff, just enough so you'll trust me, and I can talk you into buying my stuff or hiring me to speak or run a workshop, boy, have we missed the point. Our connectedness in love is strength as humans. Our true, people say this kind of slogan all the time, well, there's more that similar about us than there is difference. That's true, and that sameness is communicated through shared story. There are other kind of stories. There's cautionary stories. There's leadership stories, inspirational stories, heroic, battle stories, and all those kinds of things. And they affect us way differently than just a recitation of facts. If you take any class, including mine, on speaking, engagement, audience, persuasion, starting a movement, learning how to lead, any of that kind of stuff, you're going to learn not only that you need stories, and not only that you need to be a master at storytelling, but learn how to do that. And the truth is, you are born with some degree of that. It's part of our humanness. But it gets mashed out of us because we start worrying about what people think of us. We start worrying about opinions. We start looking around and measuring approval. And so we then hold back the truth of what we know, what we've lived, and who we are, because it's being measured and weighed. Now, there's an author that I'm sure you know of, Joseph Campbell, who wrote a book. He wrote many books. One of the most famous is The Hero with 1,000 Faces. It's a fabulous book, and it is essentially the origin book, but not the only work he did, but the origin book about the hero's journey, right? And so that is briefly one of the powerful methods and tools to think about in both crafting a story, including writing a book, giving a talk, etc. But what he observes there is that the hero's journey appeals to us, and they always contain a pretty predictable pattern. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the hero's journey here, but it's important for you to know it. And if you haven't read Hero of 1,000 Faces, you ought to get it. Or at least the Cliff Notes, or take my class or something. But here's what happens. Here's the steps. There's an ordinary world. There's a call to someone in the ordinary world. There's a refusal, not me, I don't, whatever. And then there's a threshold that person then crosses, some trials and difficulties. And then there's the death of an old identity. And that's really important. And then there's a transformation, and then a return to the ordinary world with a gift as a changed person, the hero person. So in that little list of things that I just gave you are $1 million worth of secrets. And indeed, Indiana Jones series, Star Wars series, on and on, all have followed more or less the hero's journey arc, and it demonstrates over and over again how insanely powerful that is for creating relationship, rapport, teaching, memory, connection, and all that sort of thing. So that's why it's important. In that list of things, remember there was the ordinary world a call, and the first thing is a refusal. The reason the person refuses, the will-be hero in the first place, is, not me, I don't have time, not right, not the right guy, whatever. Moses did that. Remember in the Bible, Moses said, oh man, God, you got the wrong dude. Like, I don't speak very well. You got to pick somebody else, right? Jonah did the same thing. And there's many biblical stories about that, but there's many stories in the world that is not in religious literature about people that are called, and they're like, no, not me. So that refusal is usually, almost always, as a result of, I don't believe in myself. I'm not adequate. I can't do this. I don't understand it. I don't know. Somebody else is better. All that sort of explanation. And then the first steps in the journey are not even about resolving the problem, the conflict that initiated it all. They're about the transformation of the hero, right? Because after the refusal, then the hero goes on a journey. There's some kind of trial. He meets a mentor, the wizard or Obi-Wan in Star Wars. There's somebody that plays that role. And then there's the part of the death of the old identity. So I'm going to invite you right now into that place. I'm going to invite you to let your old identity die right now. Not all of it, but the part that says I can't, I won't, I'm not good enough, who would listen, who cares, I don't have it. Anything that sounds like that, let that die. Because what I know about you is you are divine, you can, you are capable, you are needed, you matter, and you can create whatever you want. I know that's true. You may not know that yet, but that's my mission, is to help you understand and do something with that if you want to. which includes writing books, creating movements, gigantic movements, making money, helping the world just exactly the way you want to. That has to come, or will only come, after the death of the old identity, the identity that says, I can't do that. Now, the last step is this return with a gift. Well, after the old identity dies, you wake up realizing, yes, you can, yes, you are, yes, you're called, you got the chops, yes, yes, yes. But that's what most people forget. A person goes through the struggles of their life. Now, we'll get it out of Campbell and put it in your life. What are the things that you've struggled with, that you've fought with, that you've bled over, the things that have hurt you, knocked you down, that you've been resilient and got past? Is it illness? Is it mental illness? Is it abuse? Is it being bullied? Is it, all of those things that shape the narrative we have of ourselves, keep us limited as long as we let them. When that goes away, because you do the work and you have the trial and you have some kind of transformation, and there's a whole episode on how to create transformation, but that isn't this one. But after you do that and you get that created and you realize that you are all that, then the gift is yours to give. But that's the part most people miss. They get themselves healed or improved or resilient or whatever it is. You grow, you do it, and then they forget to return with the gift because they're afraid they'll be laughed at, looked down on, right? Because somebody or some great crowd isn't waiting at the gates heralding their return as a hero. That happens in some stories. But for you and me, whatever dark nights, plural, of the soul you and I walked through, on the other side, there wasn't a parade. There wasn't a television show or a radio announcement or, a book written right away about our journey and story. It's our opportunity to write that. Because most of the time it doesn't write itself. That's very, very rare. So the truth is, you suffered, so did I, you learned, you changed, and then we stop short of bringing the gift back. Holy crap, we're now loaded with gold. We're loaded with certainty, with experience, with joy, with power. But because of fear, or because we think it doesn't matter, or because nobody already rewarded us and came and brought us, the blue ribbon, we think, oh, it must not be true. It's not true. It's not true. Your story is so important, and we need it today more than we ever have. Anyway, so here's a couple of things to remember. Your own story, through that thing, the dark night, the recovery, the transformation, and now I'm inviting you to consider returning with your gift. Your story is a container for truth. The truth you learned, fought for, bled for, it is your container for truth. The hero's journey is a mechanism, but it's really not for entertainment. I mean, it is. We have movies and books and all kinds of stuff, so it is for entertainment. But not all. That's not all it's for. It's actually a map of your becoming. It's a map of the truth you now have. But the gift isn't complete until we bring it back to serve, till we bring it back to change the world, till we bring it back to do the thing that we envisioned that we know we could do, and stop being afraid. And yes, we need guidance and leadership and encouragement. Yes, we need someone in our corner. And that's why I love being a coach so much. That's why I did Dream, Build, Write It. It's to be in your corner. You want to turn your story into $1 million? You want to turn it into 1 million followers? You want to turn it into all kinds of opportunity? You want to change the world? DreamBuildWriteIt.com. Go there. Let me show you how. Anyway, so this episode's about how story has been that power all the way. And it will be forever till we no longer breathe, because we are built to live and love and share and be through story. So here's some of the things that story does. It cuts across age. Like we hear the story of the wolf told to a little boy. I get it. I've heard it many times in my years. And every time I hear it, it means something different. Why? Because I'm a different person. It cuts across cultures, right? It cuts across race, politics, profession, education. It just cuts through that. Religion, social class, and personal history. It can do that. Today, what seems like it's happening, and this is so sad, we have become so put into silos, so calcified about our own beliefs that we sometimes don't even allow the truth of the stories to penetrate. And that's why your story and mine are so needed. Underneath the story are all the universal elements. It's all the same feelings you and I were made of. Fear, loss, love, shame, hope, courage, betrayal, forgiveness, desire, a hunger for meaning, a longing to be seen, a yearning to matter. Like those are common across every age, race, culture, religion, everything. It's built into us. And rightfully so, because you are a divine being in embryo. So learning what story is, which we did last episode and some today, and learning how to use story as a powerful tool to create impact and income, and then learning your story is the best one you've got. See, I don't care if you get so good at telling somebody else's story. Hear me, it will never have the power that you have with your story. Your story invites us all to recognize our common humanity. This is why somebody can hear a story about addiction or grief or business failure or parenting or illness or divorce or spiritual awakening or leadership collapse or any of those things and say, that's me. Wow, that's just, I know that place. I recognize that. I've felt that. I've had that too. And then more beautifully, wow, maybe I can stand up. Maybe I can try again. Maybe I can rise up through this. Because the truth is that story might just be the bridge. Your story, not any story, between somebody's life and their possibility. Most of the time, most people, and yes, I'm generalizing, but I talk to a lot of people, most people live a life and they look at a possibility over here. So they have life and a possibility. And what they see in the middle is a great chasm. I can't possibly get from here to here. Your story may be the bridge. Really. I want you to let that land. The details differ, but human truth connects and connects deeply. A good story doesn't say, look at me. What it really says is, look what is possible for you. That's why stories work forever. That's why we've been using them since humans have been breathing. Because it is, you can do them with pride and arrogance and all the rest, but their real power is not in, look what I did, but look what is possible for you. One of the things, like a woman has a great accomplishment. And what do they say? She's a role model for all the other girls. Why? Because look what's possible. True in every circumstance. A person who's injured or in a wheelchair feels despair. Here's a story. And it's not about them. It's about, wow, maybe I can do that, or my version of that. You know, you see these people who paint with a paintbrush, you know, in their mouth or in their feet or something. And it just, I see those and I'm flabbergasted. And I think, what business do I have complaining about anything? And in fact, it gives me courage. I don't care how old they are, how young they are, what race, culture, religion, none of that matters. Nothing. What matters is what I see And what I feel is, look what's possible for me. Okay? Now, here's some more difference. So if you're giving somebody instruction, you might tell them to forgive. You might tell them to be brave, or tell the truth, or take ownership, or build the business, or write the book, or leave that old identity. It's easy to say those words, but what story does for the very same thing is it shows what it feels like. It lets it be really clear what it cost. It lets it be seen how somebody resisted, maybe just like you are, or I have. It also shows what changed and what becomes possible. And so those are much bigger envelopes than just, the words. Words just give commands, and people resist commands. We all do. Stories let us lean into possibility. That's why the best teachers who have ever walked the planet use story, not to entertain, but to transfer belief, to make truth contagious. A principle becomes believable when it's carried by a life, when you can see the implementation. Story lets people borrow courage they may not even have right now. All of those things are good. Instruction gives direction. Story gives permission. There's lots of ways to describe this, but it's so important. All right, now I want to move it now from story. This first whole bunch, we've talked about what story is. And the last episode, we've talked about how it's been used for the entire human history, why it's powerful, why it matters, and all that. But it's always been story out there. So now I want to move it to your story, how your story can do this. Okay? See, if story is how we humans have always carried truth, then it follows immediately that your story matters because it contains truth, not because you're already famous. It contains your truth. And there are at least 1 million people right this minute that are waiting with their ears open to hear you speak your truth. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm not. I know it. I've seen it. I've experienced it myself, and I've helped others experience it with their story, and you're no exception. And this is not because your life was dramatic. It's not about being showy or dramatic or any of that kind of stuff. And it's not because you need the attention. It's because of the yearning that sits deep in your soul to make a difference. You carry a piece of truth that somebody else right this minute is in desperate need of. The question is never going to be, is your story big enough? The question is the truth inside of your story useful? Not, has somebody else said it? None of that even matters. Is the truth in your story useful? If the answer to that is yes, and it always is, then your story matters. And it matters a lot, and it matters to a lot of people. The person who hears your story, either through a book or a series of videos or a talk, a speech from stage, or a workshop or a product or teaching you do at Sunday school in your church if you do, your listener, whoever that is, they might be carrying a story that you can solve, something they've been struggling with for years, and you can solve it in the length of a story. You might be the story that gives a leader courage. You might be the story that helps somebody forgive. That one's near and dear to my heart because that was such an integral piece of my own transformation and growth, both forgiving others, forgiving myself, and all the rest. Your story might be somebody else's path out of their dark woods. You might have the story that makes somebody feel less alone, less abandoned. You might be carrying the story that is the first chapter of somebody's new life. Like you actually have no idea of the depth and power that you already have and that you might be afraid to use. So here's a couple of ways to think about this. Your story might be ordinary. In fact, it almost always is ordinary to us because we're standing right in the middle of the miracle that we are. And I want you to let that land. You are a miracle. You have gotten through all the struggles and pain and challenges and difficulty here right now because you're hearing me. And you're standing in the middle of that miracle and you may not even be able to see it. So it seems ordinary to you because you walked it minute by minute and hour by hour. And outside, it's like amazing. So that's one reason we might not see it sometimes. And here's the thing. I'm pleading with you, but I'm going to say it directly. You don't get to decide your truth is useless just because it's familiar. Please don't decide your truth isn't valuable just because it's familiar. Somebody else right this minute is in need of the map that's folded up in your pocket. I want you to hear that. Story is the mechanism for our whole human history. You got a map through your dark nights, learnings, trials, and struggles folded in your pocket, and that might just exactly be, in fact, I know it is, what somebody needs right this minute. I use the word might. My experience is I know that. I've seen it and I've felt it for not just me, but for many. Okay? So now's the question for you. I hope between the last episode, which we talked about what your story actually is and what it isn't. And again, if you haven't heard that one, get over there and listen to the last episode. And we've talked about how it's been used for our whole history and why it matters. And then we have now brought it down personally to you. Your story matters. So then the question is, what are you going to do with all that truth? What are you going to do with what you now know? Because right now, I know that you're feeling the truth of what I'm telling you. Your story matters. It's important. You've got the map for somebody else's life folded in your pocket. So what are you going to do with that? You can keep it there and do nothing. You're free to do that. You can just maybe tell a story about things at the right moment to a friend or at work or in a social gathering or whatever. You're free to do that. If you really want to have the impact that your heart is calling for, you have to organize it and turn it into something. You have to make it available. There's 100 ways to do that. My favorite way is to write a book. That's why Dream, Build, Write It is one of my big deals. Because there's nothing like writing a book, because a book's a monologue, right? So there's nothing like writing a book that makes us have to organize the story, the learnings, the teachings, the events, the morals, whatever we learn from it. There's nothing like a book to do that, to make us do that because it's a monologue and we've got to, do it in a way that flows. So Dream, Build, Write It is a place to go look if you want help to do that. We're not there to write a cute story. The process for you right now is examine the truth that your life already carries, that maybe you've glossed over. Examine the power of your story. See in that way the story of your own becoming. And then the next piece is ask the question, how do I shape this into service? How do I turn this into something that's really going to matter for somebody? It's easier than you think. I was going to say it's not as hard as it sounds. It's easier than you think. It's with AI and with the story arc and with guidance of someone who's done it a whole bunch, you can do that. You can create income, impact, the movement you want, elevate consciousness, help usher in 5D. You can do all that with your story, but only if it's organized well so that it can do the things that story does, which is connect deeply. If you want my help to if you want to have my help learning how to tell stories, then yourultimatelyfepodcast.com, use the contact form and tell me, I want storytelling in the headline. And I hold a class periodically when I get half a dozen or more people that want to do that. So that'll be a way to do that. If you know you're ready to create something from your story, if you know that and it's burning a hole in your pocket or your heart, let's come to the challenge. Dream, build, write it. The next one doesn't matter. It's always perpetual. There'll always be one within a few months. Because right now I can show you how to organize it, turn it into service so you can make a difference for people, and I can help you make the difference you really want. And overcome all this nonsense about what it does or doesn't mean. It matters. You matter. And you have every right to build and live your ultimate life, purpose, prosperity, and joy. It is your divine capability. It's written in your DNA, but it doesn't come automatically. You're entitled to your ultimate life, but we have to build it. We have to create it. It doesn't come in an Amazon box. Ah, darn. But it's available to you right here, right now. I know it because I walk the roads from misery to living the ultimate life. Every day, every minute, every hour. And I know that if you want to, you're willing to walk the road, nothing can keep you from experiencing on a daily basis your ultimate life.
Never hold back and you'll never ask why. Open your heart and this time around.
Right here, right now. Your opportunity for massive growth is right in front of you. Every episode gives you practical tips and practices that will change everything. If you want to know more, go to KellanFluckigerMedia.com. If you want more free tools, go here, YourUltimateLife.ca. Subscribe. Share.
Stand with your heart.